One of the chief, arguments against Christianity is the hiddenness of God. And we talk about Christianity being a personal religion, that God personally cares for each individual. How do you take into account, if you have an old age view of the universe, how do you take into account only the small light that's given to each individual, particularly you think about in maybe faraway cultures from biblical times, and it seems like the knowledge grows out over time, and now we're quite privileged, but it seems that there were many, many years where things were quite dark.
Okay.
Your question on the hiddenness of God, which is of course quite a big issue on which theologians and philosophers have weighed in. For those of you who have not heard the term, you've certainly wrestled with the idea. I remember getting a letter once from a young man in Washington who said, "Why has God made it so difficult to believe in him?" And what he was positioning was the fact that I don't just see him in some open and obvious ways that I would like to see him. And people sometimes when they raise these questions wonder whether Christian apologists don't think of these things, they don't struggle with these things, they don't wrestle with these things. We absolutely do. We absolutely do. But I want to give you 2 or 3 lines of approach on how to address this. Number one, that while you never have that sense where at every juncture and at every time you've wanted God to show up in some obvious way, he has actually shown up in that obvious way. You never seem to have that as a very constant experience. You have just enough experience either in your life or from observing somebody else's where you see that only the supernatural, only God could have explained what it is that's happened in this instance. Let me give you a couple of illustrations of this. Last week I was in Williamsburg, and the day before that, just before I went and spoke there was a gentleman who had asked if I would come and visit him. He was a retired minister. He was in his 70s. The last 30 to 35 years of his life, it all began with an episode where he slipped and fell for no explainable reason at all. A few days later, he stumbled again. And by the time he was getting used to walking once more, he said, "Something is not right. I'm not able to hold my balance." They discovered some kind of a spinal problem that was deteriorating, went on from there to a wheelchair, and then to be carried about in a stretcher. And now for the last 7 years, he has been bedridden in his home there in Williamsburg. The only thing that works is from here and above. Nothing else works. He's a prisoner in his own body. And as I stood by his bedside along with my colleague, fighting the tears away, watching how terrible a situation it must be, where you cannot even move a hand of your own. And he, with his head propped up, he said to my colleague and myself, my colleague who's here tonight, he said, "You know, Ravi, in the last 8 years of my life, the less able I have become, the more close I have sensed God coming to me, and the more productive I have been in creating a series of Bible studies for 780 series of studies for Bible colleges and seminaries all over the world." And by the time we finished talking with him, I was wiping the tears away from my eyes and wondering how I could ever be in a situation like that and say the things that he did. When you have lived a life that walks closely with God, you find out that physical debilitation with all of its hazards is not the ultimate destruction and the ultimate loss in your life and mine. A woman who was totally disabled wrote, "He giveth more grace when the burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength when the labors increase. To added affliction he addeth his mercy. To multiplied trials his multiplied peace. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength has failed ere the day is half done, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving has only begun. His love has no limit, his grace has no measure, his power has no boundaries known unto men. For out of his infinite riches in Jesus, he giveth and giveth and giveth again." The largest number, you please allow me to stand, I have serious back issues myself. The largest number of men and women in the Middle East today who are coming to Christ by the tens of thousands are coming to Christ because of a vision or a dream in which God has intervened in their lives. The countries have banned the gospel from coming in. I had one man in a country I shall leave unnamed. My wife and I were there meeting with him. He told us that for 7 years, and prior to that he was in Saddam Hussein's army in Iraq. He said, I knew how to do two things: make false passports and kill people without feelings. Make false passports and kill people without feelings. And I started to have this dream about Jesus every night, every night, every night. What, not one night, not 2 nights, not 3 nights, not 1 month, not 2 months, not 1 year, not 2, 3 years. And he said, then this man sitting next to me after my mother told me to leave the country lest I get killed, I escaped to this country. And after 7 years of dreaming that dream every night, he said to me, do you think God is trying to say something to you? He said, I've become a follower of Jesus Christ. He said, I'm planning to go back to Iraq and tell the story. I said, how are you planning to get back? He said, I make passports. I said, don't even think of it. Ladies and gentlemen, for every one person whom I tell you God seems so hidden, I could tell you stories as I travel, how in enormous ways he will reveal himself to you. And the test I want to give you is this. You go to bed tonight, and I'll get on your knees and ask Jesus Christ, if he's who he claims to be, to reveal himself to you in one way or the other. And I'll tell you sooner or later, he will make himself known till a point will come where you will say, there is no other explanation for what's happening other than that he is on my trail. You'll find it that he's not hidden, he's quite revealed.